What should be prioritized when we talk about military spending? What the military needs, or how that spending can boost the economy? It's an interesting question and one at the heart of Canada's new industrial defense strategy. I was reading about the details of this new plan in the CBC, and the new strategy has set some lofty goals. Over the next 10 years, they want to make it so that 70% of all defense contracts are awarded to Canadian companies, with a special focus on bringing ammunition production, digital and cloud-based capacity, satellite surveillance, and vehicle manufacturing, and in particular drone production, into Canada. The plan also outlines a desire to champion research and development, as well as boost Canadian military exports by 50%, with the goal of creating something like 125,000 jobs. So that's all what's in the reporting, but there's also a few things that I noticed that were not in the reporting. First, that goal to get to 70% of all contracts going to Canadian companies. That sounds laudable, but what's not outlined is what percentage of contracts currently go to Canadian companies. Whenever I read stories like this that are talking about making big changes, I'm always looking for what the baseline of the current conditions are, so I can better understand the scope of what's being promised. An example of what I mean here is actually in the same CBC article, where they talk about wanting to improve serviceability rates of Canadian military equipment up to 85%. That's an increase from around 46 to 54%. Although they don't actually even define what serviceability means. A little bit of a rabbit hole here, so stick with me. A phrase like serviceability might seem like common sense, and it probably is, but the CBC is basing their reporting off military documents, which don't use those terms colloquially. To underscore that, the article actually puts the term "not serviceable" in quotes, indicating that it is some kind of specific or technical definition, but they don't provide it. They also say that their quotes are based off of figures that they obtained last year, but they don't link to that previous reporting. I had to dig back and find a 2024 article, which is still vague, but expanded on the idea, saying that a not serviceable vehicle is one that couldn't be relied on to respond if called upon. Okay, so that's sort of what we assumed. The last thing I'll note, at least on the media literacy side of this story, is that normally if you had any real questions about the reporting, you could just go back and read the original documents yourself. But in this case, with the new industrial defense strategy, you can't, or at least you can't yet. The report was supposed to be released last week, but it was embargoed after the Tumbler Ridge shooting. Embargoed means when a journalist has a copy of something, but they're not allowed to publicly report on it until a set time. But in this case, apparently the Financial Times in the UK broke that embargo. So I guess CBC was like, screw it, we're going to report on it now as well. As of recording, that report is scheduled to be released on Tuesday. Last thing that I think is interesting here is how the CBC spoke to an expert who said that basically this whole defense strategy seems like it's more focused on economic development than actually providing the military with what it needs. Which brings us back to that initial question.